Hello and welcome to this lecture on Adobe Photoshop by Eduonix. In this lecture we're going to be going over the dodge, burn, and sponge tool. And what these are is just a dodge tool is to lighten and a burn tool is to darken, and a sponge tool is a little bit more complicated, but they're kind of inspired by actual use in a darkroom. So you would use the dodge tool. The reason why it looks like that is they would hold a little circle. Photographers, when they're developing the actual pictures like the old traditional way, they'll hold a little circle over it when the light is hitting the photographic paper, which will keep, it'll lighten it. It'll keep a little bit of the whiteness from the photographic paper, and they'll just hold it over areas, so they're actually dodging the light, and that's the whole point of the dodge tool. So obviously these are things that are good if you're really familiar with actual photographic techniques. And the burn tool being the same exact thing, except it's burning. So there's a story behind that, I'm sure, if you want to look it up. And the sponge tool will desaturate or saturate colors. And you have the option of vibrance here. And of course you have the option of always using pressure for size, etc. We have another option right here, enable airbrush style buildup effects. So this will open your brush presets panel, and it's for all of them. So let's take a photo and see what they do. So here I've used a picture from a few tutorials back. And I'm going to start out with the dodge tool. Set to normal levels, exposure 50, no buildup effects or any of that, and it's set to midtones. And I want to show you this for each of the brushes. Which will require me to have, I think, 9 of these. Let me just check. No, not for the sponge tool. Just 6, I guess. So these first ones are going to be going from shadows to midtones to highlights. Shadows, midtones, highlights for the burn tool. So with the dodge tool, I'll go over the left side of the face once, and you can change your brush size just like anything else. And I'll go over the right side of the face twice, and you can see a comparison here. So it's basically just lightening up the image. Just doing it in a really controlled way. And you can obviously combine this with selections and things like that. So it's doing it in a very controlled way. Now I'm going to hide that layer. You can see the original image again. I'm going to set this to midtones. Once again, only going over once. You can see the areas that were a little bit lighter are now getting colored. And typically when you're using this tool, you'll combine, and we're going over the right side twice, you'll combine this with other things. So that's the difference between mid-tone dodge tool, and it's the difference between the shadows dodge tool. So with the shadows dodge, it's lightening up everything that's dark, and it's really not messing with stuff that's already very light. With the midtones, it's lightening up like for her eyes a lot more, the lighter parts of her skin. Let's take a look at highlights. When I do highlights, that's one pass. That's 2 passes over here. you look at her lips, they're not very much changed. If you look at the dark features that she has, once again, they're not that altered either. So it's making your skin really yellow. So let's take a quick look at the burn tool. Now I'm burning midtones right here. So I'm actually going to jump on, keeping the same format, jumping on shadows. And exposure, I should say, for both of these tools, exposure is the maximum amount that this is going to affect it. If I set it to 100, and I just so 50 by default is generally a good setting to have it on. Protect tones, we're just going to ignore that and leave it on pretty much all the time. So I'm burning over one side of the face and twice over this side, so we'll have something to compare. Now let's take a look at the difference between the shadows. This is with lightened. We did basically the same thing, lightening shadows, and compare that to normal, and then we burned. So it creates a lot more contrast and vividness. Now, a good practical application of this tool would be only doing some of the areas. You can create impressions of a shadow, you can make an image pop out. Because I'm using a graphics tablet, I can variate the amount by just going lightly. You could also accomplish this with a custom selection. If I just stick to the shadows on her face, I don't really like that last one. I can change the lighting, in which case if I chose highlights here, now I'm burning mainly the light parts and I could focus on that. Of course, I have a better example to show you all these things than this woman. So here we have different gradating colors, and as you can guess, I'm just going to be dragging these tools over it. So there I've dodged an area doing highlights, and I'm dragging it over at full pressure. If I just hit this edge, it's going to bring out the brightest parts of the image the most. It's taking a while to process. So there's a before and after. When it's done processing, that is. I'm using a 250 point brush, so it's before and that's after. See, it didn't do as much to the purple as it did to the brighter colors. So let's just take a look at what it does. And set to shadows, the opposite. Not a whole lot. If I go down here, I make the shadows smaller, because essentially all this is a gradient. You can see my circle and if I go up to here, I didn't really do very much. So this model will show you a lot better. And we have midtones. I'll drag 3 across. I'll do shadows on the top. And this is lightening. So you can see shadows lighten that shadow. That's midtones. And then highlights is doing a lot more to the light side and pretty much nothing to the dark side. Sometimes with colors it's hard to tell. Blue looks a little darker than orange when in reality this is about the same saturation. Obviously the orange is a lot brighter because it's set to highlights. So what that means here for this lady, for her face, so she has some of the coloration from a previous tutorial. Let's just take her hair for example. If I wanted to darken her hair, I wanted to create more variation, I'd simply use this. And I mentioned before that this tool is very suited for photographers. Now I need to change this to shadows because I'll be doing the back side of her hair, creating more depth. No, I didn't actually change it. And I can set this to a little bit less intense. When you hit the numbers on the keyboard, it changes the exposure. Exposure is pretty much like opacity when you're applying opacity to stuff. But the cool thing about how it's separated is, as you can see, I'm going right around this earring, and it's doing nothing to the earring. It's darkening the hair behind it. So I can create a lot of depth with this tool. And it uses the natural colors, so you can even use it to create a little bit of eyeshadow. That would be with the shadows. If you want a more vibrant eyeshadow, you could use highlights. So like I said, these are geared towards the photographer, although they're useful if you're touching up an image. So play around with those and get the hang of them, because as you can see, it dodged this earring. It's a pretty useful tool. And thanks for watching. Oh wait, you got one more, and that's the sponge tool. The sponge tool's actually a lot more forward than I remembered originally. So I have it set to desaturate, and we'll do the left eye. I hit it once, and the difference you can see is it's taking some of the saturation out, which this was originally colored rather garishly. So if I continue to get it and turn vibrance off, if I continue to hit this, eventually it'll make it black and white. This is 50% on top of 50% on top of 50%. I'll just go back here and set it to 100. It'll do black and white straight off the bat. Maybe not directly straight off, but it does it a lot faster. So you got areas in your picture, like these eyes especially, that have too much color in them and don't look real. You can just come in with this tool, the sponge tool, and you can remove some of that color. Like if I had some color bleeding over into the whites of the eyes. Now if I change this to saturate, it's going to have the opposite effect. Let's take her lips for example. And pretty much any part of her. As you can see, saturate is taking where there's color and is really bringing it out. And where it's just white, obviously there's no color there. And where there's just black, it's not going to do very much anything either. But if you wanted to brighten somebody's eyes, it's a great tool for that. Like I have this colored, there's no difference in brightness. So a way I could remove this color is by using the sponge tool set to desaturate. In the end, still have it on saturate. In the end, it shouldn't really do anything to the image at all. You'll just see the color disappear. Now I can just come in and recolor her. Kind of a blank canvas here. But you would use this in the case of, say, her shirt's too dark. You would actually kind of desaturate that manually. If you wanted to, if you had a black and white photo that had a little bit of color information in it, you could use the saturate version on the eyes, just bring out the eyes, just make small adjustments and do it to individual parts of the photo. That's what it's for. So that's about it for all those tools. Practice with them as always, and thanks for watching.